There are mornings so quiet you can hear the house breathe. This is one of them. The first light creeps through the crack in the door, lighting up the old wooden table. Just 2 coffee mugs on it, one for me and one for the one who's already gone. Every year on Father's Day, I make 2 cups just like this. Folks say it's a sad habit, but for me, it's how I keep Rose from ever really leaving this house. The house we built with our own 2 hands, frame by frame, nail by nail, through long afternoons full of sawdust and laughter. My name is Earl Thompson. I'm 72 years old. All my life I've lived by these hands, building walls, hanging drywall, planting trees. These days, those hands shake more than they used to, but they're still steady enough to lift Rose's white porcelain mug. It's the last thing she left behind, with a little chip on the rim I never had the heart to throw away. In the rich smell of the coffee, I remember the mornings she'd sit across from me, stirring in sugar while scolding me for drinking it on an empty stomach. I laugh to myself, then fall quiet. Her smile, even now, is brighter than the sun pouring into this kitchen. I live on the outskirts of Greenville, in a little house on the corner of Willow Creek. The paint on the outside is peeling, but the hibiscus bushes are still blooming as red as ever. I don't have much. A few potted plants, an old radio, some photographs. But I have something money can't buy: memories. They say memories weigh you down, but for me, they're what's holding this house up. This morning, I got up earlier than usual, felt a kind of nervous hum inside me, like a wind kicking up before a change. Today is Father's Day. I know Michael, my only son, will come. He lives in the city. He's busy, rarely calls, but I don't blame him. Young folks have their own lives. For old folks like me, just hearing a knock on the door is enough to warm your heart. I set the table. The rice is ready from last night, a pot of pinto beans with a bit of smoked hock, the smell mixing with the fresh brewed coffee. In the middle of the table, I put a picture of Rose, the one we took the day we finished the house. She's wearing her old floral dress, hands still stained with paint, but smiling like the sun. I whisper, "He's coming today, Rose. This time I bet he stays a little longer." The picture doesn't answer, of course, but in my heart I feel a soft nod. I open the door to let the morning breeze roll down the hall. The neighborhood kids are already starting up their noise. The donut truck is making its rounds in the distance. I sit in my chair, waiting for that familiar ring. Over the years, every time my son comes, I recognize his ring. Strong, determined, different from anyone else's. I take the first sip of coffee, watching the steam rise like the house's own breath. For a second, I think maybe I don't need anything else in life. A roof over my head, memories of the woman I loved, and the sound of a son's doorbell, a son who's never forgotten his old man. But I didn't know that the ring I was about to hear today would be the start of a long, hard storm. Before we continue, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments below. I hear a car pull up, the engine so smooth it's like the whisper of a well-kept machine. Through the window slats, I see the gleaming silver car shining in the sun. Michael gets out first, white pressed shirt, blue tie, black leather shoes without a speck of dust. Behind him, Stephanie, his wife, opens her door slowly. She's tall, hair in soft waves, with big sunglasses covering half her face. She doesn't need to look around. Her look says it all. This place is not for her. I wipe my hands on the rag hanging from the sink and step out onto the porch. "Son!" The word escapes me, warm and a little cracked with emotion. Michael smiles and gives me a quick hug, just tight enough not to wrinkle his shirt. "Happy Father's Day, Dad." A short, polite greeting. Sounds like he practiced it in the mirror. I nod, smiling just enough, trying to hide the empty feeling inside. "Come on in, you two. The house is the same, hasn't changed a bit." Stephanie crosses the threshold, her heels clicking softly on the concrete floor. She looks up, scanning the small living room, where the walls are covered in old photos and the potted plants are still green. "How charming," she says. "So rustic." A compliment with a half-smile that I know is hiding discomfort. Her perfume fills the room, overpowering the smell of the coffee brewing on the stove. I serve lunch. Rice, pinto beans, some BBQ ribs my neighbor, Old Man Higgins, gave me, and a big pitcher of sweet iced tea, nice and cold. The red-flowered tablecloth I bought new at the farmer's market. I'd prepped everything this morning, like a little ceremony. Michael sits, adjusts his cuffs, and looks around. Stephanie, meanwhile, puts her phone face down next to her plate, though her eyes dart to it every time it buzzes. I pour the tea to break the ice. Father Thomas stopped by yesterday. Reminded me today is a big deal, a day for families to get together. So glad you came. Michael nods, that slight smile again. Work's been crazy, Dad, but not coming on Father's Day. That'd be a sin. The line sounds as real as it is forced. I know you're busy, but a successful man's busy is different from a poor man's busy. One gets tired of living, the other gets tired of keeping up appearances. Stephanie just nods, a thin smile, and raises the glass to her lips without drinking. I look at her, then at my son. I feel a strange distance between them, like two people living separate lives at the same table. I want to ask about his work, but Michael beats me to it. I'm opening another branch, Dad. Everything's going great. I smile. You always were good at business. Just remember to rest. Nobody says anything else, just the clinking of spoons against plates and the long, slow tick of the wall clock. Outside, the sun hits the wall, lighting up the corner with Rose's picture. Stephanie glances at the photo, then looks away. I feel my heart tighten. There's a kind of light between us, not sunlight, but the dim light of things left unsaid. Michael raises his head and smiles a little. I brought you a gift. Here, a small box wrapped in fancy paper with a gold bow. I open it, a pair of slippers, soft as a cloud. So you can wear these around the house and your knees won't hurt. I smile for the first time for real all day. Thank you, son, but you know, the main thing I wanted today was for you to stay a little longer. Michael goes quiet, staring at his plate. Stephanie sighs softly, her fingers drumming on her phone. The meal goes on, but it doesn't taste good to anyone anymore, because I didn't know that in just a few minutes when my son asked a seemingly innocent question, the last bit of peace from that day would shatter like a porcelain cup in my hands. We were still sitting there, in the little kitchen thick with the smell of coffee and pinto beans. Outside, the wind rustled the hibiscus, sounding like the old house sighing. I was telling my son the neighborhood news, that old man Higgins had just lost his dog, that the preacher was planning to plant a new dogwood tree by the church. That's when Michael set his spoon down and sighed. It wasn't a tired sigh. It was the sigh of someone bracing to say something. Hey, Dad, he said, his voice soft but clear. Are you getting by okay with the money I send every month? I paused, thinking I'd heard him wrong. What money, son? Well, the $900, Dad. I've been sending it on the dot every month for the last 9 months. You haven't been getting it? For a moment, I heard nothing but the clock ticking. My hands, holding the glass of sweet tea, started to shake. What are you saying, Michael? Who did you send money to? To you. You said you didn't like bank transfers, so I asked Stephanie to bring it to you in cash. I turned to look at Stephanie. She had her phone in her hand and froze right at that second. Our eyes met. Hers were quick, like the edge of a knife. She smiled, then looked away. Oh, he's probably just forgotten, she said, her voice sweet as sugar. I've been bringing him the money. Don't you remember, Earl? You even make me coffee. I leave the envelope right here on the kitchen table. I set my glass down, my heart pounding in my chest. No, Stephanie. Since you married Michael, you haven't set foot in this house. Not until today. The room suddenly felt very heavy. Michael looked at us, first at me, then his wife, then back at me. His face tensed up, that look of doubt I knew from when he was a boy, right after he broke his mother's vase and tried to hide it. Dad, are you sure? As sure as I am that I built this roof with my own 2 hands. If I had that money, I wouldn't have had to get rice from the church pantry. Stephanie let out a little laugh, thin as a razor. Oh, Earl, maybe you're just getting forgetful. It happens to older folks. It's nothing strange. I brought it every single month. Her words hit me like a slap. I felt my face get hot, not with anger, but with the insult. I might forget a lot of things, Stephanie, I said, my voice shaking but clear. But I never forget the feeling of having money in my pocket, or the feeling of having nothing to eat. Michael leaned back in his chair, clenching his fists. Stephanie, show me the withdrawal messages, the bank transfers to your account before you got the cash. She forced a smile. I don't have them on this phone. They must be on my old one. I want to see them. The silence stretched. All you could hear was the hum of the fridge and the smell of the beans. I saw my son's lips tighten, his jaw tense. I knew in that moment his life was splitting in two, before he knew the truth and after. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. 3 firm knocks. I got up, my heart racing. When I opened it, I saw Father Thomas holding a bag of groceries and a couple bottles of cooking oil. "Earl," he said with a kind smile, "here's this week's delivery from the food pantry. Thanks for helping us weed the church garden. God bless you and your family." I thanked him and took the bag. Behind me, I heard a chair scrape and a sharp intake of breath. Michael was staring at me. Then he looked at the bag of groceries, and then at his wife. In his eyes, there was confusion, then disappointment, and finally, a pain that a father wishes he could take on for his son. I set the bag of groceries on the floor and sighed. "That's your answer, son. I'm not forgetful. It's just, some other folks have forgotten about honesty." Stephanie looked down, silent. Michael still hadn't said a word. But I knew that this meal and the whole life that came after it would never be the same. Nobody said another word, just the light clink of a spoon against a plate, and then silence. Michael sat up straight, his gaze fixed on Father Thomas as he walked away. The priest waved goodbye, not knowing he'd just brought something much heavier than a bag of rice into this house, a living, breathing piece of proof. I was still standing in the doorway, holding on to the faded wooden frame. I felt something pounding in my chest. It wasn't exactly anger. It was more like a storm gathering, slow and deep. When I turned around, I met my son's eyes, empty, stunned, and hurt. Stephanie, meanwhile, had her hand on her phone, but her thumb was visibly shaking. "Dad, I want to see your bank statements," Michael said, his voice low and firm. "I can check them right now if you want," I replied, nodding. He pulled out his phone, his fingers flying. Stephanie stayed seated, her face a mask, just a slight twitch at her lips. I heard a notification sound, then silence. 9 transfers, each for $900, Michael read, his voice low. "The receiving account is in the name of Earl Thompson, but the last 4 digits are 9826. I frowned. "My account ends in 1437, you know that. I've had the same bank passbook since Rose was alive." Michael looked at the screen again, and then called the bank. I heard the voice of a teller through the speakerphone. "The account ending in 9826 is registered to Stephanie R. Thompson." The air froze. I heard my son's ragged breath, and Stephanie, she closed her eyes for just a second. Then she opened them, with a smile so forced it looked like it was glued on. "I can explain," she said quickly. "When I opened the account, they said he needed a new driver's license, and your dad didn't have one. I just received it temporarily, to keep it safe. I was going to save up a nice big amount and give it to him later so he'd have a real nest egg." Her words landed softly, but they smelled like fear. I didn't get mad. After 70 years, I know anger doesn't make anyone listen. I just sat down. I poured more coffee and pushed the porcelain mug toward my son. "You know, Michael," I said slowly, "there are things you don't need to keep in a bank vault. A single lie is all it takes to lose them forever." Stephanie's lips tightened. "Mr. Thompson, don't say that. I'm not saying it out of anger, Stephanie." I cut her off. "I just want to ask. For these 9 months, when I was standing in line for groceries from the food pantry, didn't you feel ashamed? When you heard people call me the poor old man, did you ever stop to think that money was sitting in your wallet?" She went quiet. Her gaze drifted to the wall where Rose's picture hung in silence. Michael sat with his head down, lacing his hands together. I saw his shoulders shake, just slightly, like a part of his world had just crumbled. "Dad," he finally said, his voice choked. "I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know." I put my hand on his shoulder, so gently I was afraid I'd break him. "I believe you, son. The problem is, sometimes you don't need to see the blood to know you've been stabbed." I stood up. I took the bag of groceries the priest had left and put it on the table. "This is the truth, simple as this bag of rice, heavy but real. From now on, you decide what to believe, the words or the things you can see." Michael didn't answer. Stephanie kept her head down, her hands clenched so tight her knuckles turned white. The little house fell into a dead silence. Only the slow tick-tock of the clock, each tick a reminder. Every lie has its day when it gets called by its real name. I don't remember who stood up first. I just remember that scene. 3 people around a table, and between us, a thick emptiness, heavier than the smell of cold coffee. Michael stared at his phone screen like he was looking for a way out. Stephanie sat straight up, trying to keep her composure, but her hands were trembling in her lap. I went back to my seat and picked up my coffee mug. In the reflection of the dark liquid, I saw a tired old man, but one with a spark still in his eyes. I took a sip, letting the bitterness dissolve. And then I spoke. Stephanie, if you're being honest, look me in the eye and tell me. Why did you take money meant for an old man you call Dad? She pressed her lips together, a weak smile. Earl, I just wanted to help. I thought if I saved the money, I could give it to you all at once later so you could do something bigger with it. Bigger? I asked. While I was in line at the church for a bag of rice? She forced another smile. I didn't know your situation was that difficult. Suddenly, Michael hit the table. Not hard, but enough to make the glasses shake. Do you have any idea how I feel? His voice went rough. For 9 months, my father lived on charity while you drove a new car. And you still have the nerve to look him in the face and say it was to help? Stephanie turned to him, tears welling up but not falling. Maybe she was crying out of fear of losing, not out of regret. I put a hand on my son's shoulder. Don't be angry, son. Anger just clouds your mind. Let her speak. There's nothing more to say, Stephanie answered, her voice dry. I did what I thought was best. If that's a sin, I'll accept it. The room went silent again. Outside, the wind blew through the open window, making the white curtain Rose had sewn tremble. I looked at that curtain and remembered the old days, when Rose taught me that some truths don't need to be shouted. They just have to stand firm to make people bow their heads. Michael took a deep breath, picked up his phone, and turned to me. Dad, from now on, I'm transferring the money directly to your account. I'll go to the bank, I'll fix all the paperwork. I nodded slightly. I'm not angry with anyone, son. I just feel sorry for someone who's forgotten that money can never replace trust. Stephanie lowered her head, her lips trembling. I'm sorry, Earl. I don't need apologies, I replied, my voice low but firm. I need honesty. If you had ever seen me in that line of people waiting for rice, you would have understood the price of a lie. It's not the money, it's the shame. Michael stood up, gathering his phone, wallet, and keys. Let's go, Stephanie. We have things to talk about at home. She nodded, wiping her tears, and followed him to the door. Before she left, she stopped and turned to me. Anyway, thank you for raising him so well. I didn't answer. I just watched their 2 silhouettes disappear past the hibiscus flowers. The door closed and the house fell back into silence. I sat down. I looked at my coffee mug again. The steam was gone. Only the grounds were left at the bottom. I thought of Rose, her smile in the picture frame. See, Rose? I said quietly. The truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to be seen. Outside, in the yard, the wind brought the smell of the flowers into the house. In my heart, instead of anger, there was just a deep sadness and a fragile ray of hope. That my son would understand that the most valuable thing a man can keep isn't his money, but his father's honor. The afternoon light was fading on the old tin roof. I was standing by the window, watching my son. He was in the yard, on his phone. His voice was low, contained, but clear. Stephanie sat silently at the table, her gaze glued to the floor tiles as if she was afraid to meet my eyes. Finally, Michael hung up and slipped the phone into his pocket. Dad, let's go, he said, not looking at anyone. I want to clear this up today. Are you sure? I asked him. Sometimes you don't have to chase the truth. It just arrives on its own. I know, he answered, his voice heavy. But if I don't see it with my own eyes, I won't be able to sleep. I nodded. This time, I'd let him decide. I had a feeling. But I also had something else, a conviction that my son needed to face this himself to finally grow up. We got into Stephanie's silver car. I sat in the back, watching out the window as the poor neighborhoods faded away, replaced by cobblestone streets and trees trimmed like they are in magazines. Every turn, every neon light felt like a scratch on my heart, marking the distance between his world and mine. Stephanie drove, her hands white-knuckling the steering wheel. Every time we hit a red light, she'd glance in the rearview mirror where my calm gaze met hers. There was no anger, just the weariness of someone who's seen too many lies. Michael sat beside her, silent, hands on his knees, knuckles white with tension. When the car entered the hills, I saw high walls covered in ivy and iron gates that buzzed open. "This is your house?" I asked. Michael just nodded. I didn't know whether to feel happy or sad. He had it all: money, status, a big house. But in the middle of it all, he was missing the simplest thing: peace. Stephanie parked in front of a white stucco mansion with a marble courtyard and a gleaming wooden door. I walked in, hearing the lonely echo of my shoes. It didn't smell like food. There was no noise from people, just the scent of vanilla air freshener and silence. Michael went straight to the study. Stephanie followed him, trying to keep her composure. "What more do you want?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You know everything. I'll pay it back. But please, don't make a scene." "I don't need to make a scene," Michael answered coldly. "I just need the truth." She walked slowly to a bookshelf. She lifted a painting of a landscape. Behind it was a wall safe, cold like a metal wound. She put in the combination. The door opened with a mechanical click that sounded like a sigh of guilt. Inside were some velvet boxes, bank books, and a white envelope with "Dad" written on it in gold ink. Stephanie took it out and held it out to Michael. "Here, see? I kept it to give your father a bigger gift later. I wanted to do something significant." Michael opened the envelope. The tearing paper sounded dry. Inside was only $200, not the $800 that should have been there. No explanation was needed. It all spoke for itself. I looked at Stephanie. Her eyes avoided mine, and then she looked down. I said quietly, "You know, money in the hands of a dishonest person is like water in a sieve. The more you try to hold on, the more you lose. And what you lost today wasn't just money. It was the last shred of trust." Michael crumpled the envelope and dropped it on the desk. "I'm not going to yell," he said, his voice heavy, "because my father taught me that justice doesn't need to be loud. But from today on, everything between us is different." Stephanie stood frozen, petrified. I looked at my son, and I saw in his eyes not anger, but the painful revelation. The price you pay when you let trust be sold in silence. Nobody said another word. Just the constant ticking of the wall clock, like the tired heartbeat of a house that was too clean, too quiet. I looked around. Everything here shined, but it had no human warmth. The house was spacious, but it felt empty, like a confession. Michael was still standing by the desk, the envelope in his hand. Stephanie was leaning against the wall, hugging her shoulders as if to stop from shaking. I saw clearly that she was no longer the arrogant woman who had walked into my house that morning. Now she was just a soul trying to hold on to the shell of her pride. "What else do you want?" Stephanie asked, her voice hoarse. "I told you, I kept it for safekeeping. I wasn't going to keep it all. I needed time." Michael looked up. His gaze wasn't warm anymore. 9 months is more than enough time. If Dad hadn't spoken up, how long were you going to wait? Until he died? Stephanie opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I saw her lips tremble. I stepped closer and spoke quietly. "Stephanie, you don't need to justify yourself. If you just look at yourself, you'll see your guilt more clearly than anyone." She turned away to hide her tears. Michael left the envelope on the table and said in a voice as cold as stone, "As of today, you no longer have access to my father's account or the company's. All the cards, all the access, I'm canceling it." She froze. "Are you kicking me out?" "No," he said. "I'm just putting things where they belong. My father's money will go back to him, our trust. I'll have to learn how to build that again. By myself." I stayed silent. In that moment, I saw the boy who used to run after me on construction sites, now made a man through pain. There are lessons no one can teach you, except betrayal itself. Stephanie took a keychain from her purse and one by one slid the keys off. The metal tinkled, a sound colder than goodbye. She set them on the table. "Here are the keys to the condo downtown," she said, her voice choked. "The car, the cards, you can have it all. But don't you dare think you're superior. Who hasn't kept a secret?" Michael didn't answer. He just stared at her for a long moment, then opened the door. "Go, Stephanie." She clutched her purse, walked out, and her perfume faded down the long hallway. When the door closed, all that was left was the heavy breathing of two men, one old, one young, and a small envelope between them, proof of 9 months of deception. Michael sat down and put his head in his hands. "Dad, I was so blind. I thought I'd chosen the right person. Turns out, I just chose an illusion." I put my hand on his shoulder. "No one sees clearly when the light is too bright, son, but tonight, you've opened your eyes." He looked up, his eyes wet. "Are you mad?" I shook my head. "Getting mad is easy. Forgiving is hard, and I always choose the harder path." We sat in silence, listening to the wind blowing through the trees in the garden. I looked around the house, so shiny, but so cold. Suddenly, I remembered the smell of coffee and Rose's laugh in our old kitchen. I said quietly, almost a whisper, "A house can be big, Michael, but if it doesn't have truth and love, it's just a temporary shelter. See? Sometimes being poor isn't the scary part. What's scary is living without a place to call home." Michael nodded, and in his tear-filled eyes I saw a small flame. Not of regret, but of someone who was starting to understand what it means to come back. We left the White House as it was getting dark. The streetlights smeared across the pavement like sad golden ribbons. The night breeze was cool, carrying the smell of the first summer rain and some jasmine from the hills. Michael drove. The dashboard lights reflected on his face, grim and cold. I sat in the back, quiet. Neither of us wanted to talk, because some pain doesn't need words, just silence to let it settle. As the car headed south, back toward my side of town, the glass buildings gave way to old streets, tangled with power lines and the smell of charcoal. I recognized my house from a distance by the shadow of the hibiscus bush leaning under the streetlight. When Michael cut the engine, the wind slipped through the crack in the door. It was cold but relieving, like the city was exhaling with me. "Come on in, son," I said. "We haven't eaten since noon. I've got some rice from yesterday and a pot of beans. It's enough for both of us." Michael nodded and gave a small smile, the first real smile of the whole long day. I lit the stove, heated the pot of beans, added a little salt. In the small kitchen, the aroma spread, simple but real, the smell of life before money complicated it. Michael sat at the table, watching my every move, like a kid watching his dad fix an old car. "You still do everything with the same calm," he said quietly. "Speed isn't what's important, son," I answered, stirring the pot. "What's important is not leaving things half-finished." I served dinner, 2 plates of white rice, the pot of beans, some fresh cheese, and the rest of the sweet tea. We ate under the dim yellow light. The silence wasn't awkward like it was at noon. It was just the warm quiet of 2 people who understand each other without needing words. Michael ate slowly, his head down. "Forgive me, Dad," he finally said, "for not seeing it, for letting you go through those months." I spooned more beans onto his plate. "You don't have to apologize. Some lessons only come when you fall down. The important thing is that you get back up, not because you're ashamed, but because you want to do what's right." He nodded, his eyes shining in the lamplight. "I promise I will. I won't let anyone touch you or this house ever again." I smiled and took a sip of tea. "I don't need protecting, son. I just need you here. When you come back, this house has life again, and that's enough for me." Michael was quiet. Then he looked around. His eyes landed on the picture of Rose on the shelf. "Mom would be watching us, wouldn't she, Dad?" I nodded slightly. "She's never left. Every morning when I make the coffee, she's right there in the steam." He stood up, walked over, and gently touched the picture frame like a long overdue greeting. I saw his shoulders tremble. Then he sighed, but his smile was more sincere than ever. The dinner finished late. I gathered the plates while my son sat there, staring at the cold cup of coffee on the table. I poured some hot water, took a sip, and then looked at him. "This taste," he said, "it's exactly the smell of my childhood." I smiled. "It's the taste of the truth, son. Bitter at first, but when you swallow, it leaves a warm, good feeling." That night, the little house was filled with laughter again. And I knew that after so many years surrounded by the smell of pinto beans and coffee steam, my son and I were finally sitting together again. Not to talk about the past, but to start over as people who truly belong in the same home. The next morning, I woke up early, like always. The neighbor's rooster crowing down the street mixed with the sound of the lady next door sweeping her porch. The morning light came through the window, shining on the wooden table where the 2 coffee mugs from last night still sat. One for me, one for Rose, like always. The only difference today was that her mug wasn't alone. Michael had already added hot water, letting the steam rise as if he was sending a good morning to his mother. "You're up early," I said, hearing him by the back door. "I want to go to the bank with you," he said, his voice soft but firm. "I already have an appointment with the manager. We're going to fix all the paperwork today. You'll have a new account, a new card. From now on, I'm depositing it directly. No middlemen." I smiled, feeling a mix of pride and bitterness. "You don't have to do this out of guilt." "No, Dad," he answered. "I'm doing it out of respect." We had a simple breakfast, buttered toast, the last of the beans, and strong, sweet coffee. When we left the house, the day was just beginning. The streets were still damp from the night's rain, and the smell of wet earth mixed with the wildflowers. I felt light, like yesterday had been a long, bad dream, and this morning was the first time I was waking up in true peace. At the bank, the young teller greeted us kindly. Michael spoke clearly and decisively, so different from the cold tone of yesterday. "I want to open a new account for my father. All future transactions will be in his name only." She nodded. She took my documents, asked the questions carefully. I signed my name with a shaky hand. The ink smudged a little, but the letters were still clear. The girl looked at me and smiled. "What a beautiful signature, Mr. Thompson. Not many older folks write with such a steady hand." I just smiled back. I've spent my whole life writing my name on walls and 2x4s. Writing it on paper is easy. Michael looked at me, and his eyes had something warm and sad in them. Maybe for the first time, he realized his father wasn't just an old man who needed taking care of, but a man who had built an entire life with his own 2 hands. When we finished, we walked out of the bank. The noon sun was beating down on the busy street. Michael said, his voice full of relief, "We took the first step, Dad. This week I'm also going to talk to Father Thomas. From now on, that help from the pantry needs to go to someone else. You don't need to stand in that line anymore." I smiled a little. "I was never ashamed of getting help, son. The only shame is when someone who has more than enough lets others go without." Michael nodded. I saw his eyes light up, a light that didn't come from success, but from understanding. Maybe in that exact moment, he really became an adult. On the way back, we passed a local BBQ joint near the market. The owner, an older woman with white hair, recognized me and called out, "Earl, haven't seen you in ages. You got your son with you today?" I smiled. "Yes, ma'am, this is my son. He's treating me to lunch." The woman looked at Michael kindly. "He looks just like you did when you were young, a splitting image." We ate amid the hustle and bustle, the smell of smoked meat, the sound of spoons scraping ceramic bowls, and the calls of street vendors, all mixed into the music of everyday life. I looked at my son and said quietly, "See? Happiness isn't found in a fancy house. It's right here, in this bowl of hot stew, being able to eat with the people you love." Michael nodded, his gaze far away. "I get it, Dad. For the first time in a long time, I really get it." That afternoon, when we got home, the setting sun was turning the yard gold. I poured 2 cups of coffee, one in front of Rose's picture frame and the other in front of my son. "Here, son," I said. Michael took it and breathed in the warm aroma. "Mom would be really happy, wouldn't she, Dad?" I nodded, staring at the photo. Yes, she would. Today this house is full of laughter again, and for those who are already gone, that's the greatest joy of all. Outside, the wind rustled the hibiscus, shaking the petals. In the steam of the coffee, I saw it clearly. Life isn't restarted with money. It's restarted with truth and with gratitude. The next few days passed in peace. Michael visited the house more often. Sometimes he brought donuts. Other times he just stopped by for a cup of coffee and to look around in silence. I noticed he was starting to smile for real, not the polite smile of a businessman. The little house had life again. The sound of the door opening, the scrape of chairs, even me complaining when he poured my coffee too full. Life seemed to have returned to its old rhythm. A slow rhythm, but a real one. But one morning, Michael showed up earlier than usual. I was sweeping the porch when I saw his car pull up. His shirt was half buttoned and he had dark circles under his eyes. "Something happened, son?" I asked. He sighed and leaned against the porch column. "I was just reviewing the company books. Something's not right, Dad." I put the broom down and waited. "I think Stephanie didn't just take your money. It's possible she was taking money from the company, too. This morning, the accountant called me. He says there are some strange expenses in the internal transaction section." He hesitated. "And they all trace back to her account." I was silent. I wasn't surprised, but I wasn't happy to hear it. The truth, when it comes out, is never pretty. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I'm going to investigate. If it's true, I'm pressing charges. I can't let the hard work of so many people be turned into a joke." I nodded. "Do it, son. But remember, do it with your head, not with your anger." Michael looked at me, his eyes full of conflict. "I don't know if I have enough calm left." "Then when you run out of calm, be quiet. Silence is louder than shouting." He nodded. I poured him a glass of water and set it in front of him. "Here. Every battle needs water, not blood." He smiled a little and took a sip. "You talk like you were a lawyer." "I was a builder, son. But bricks and laws are the same. If you lay the first one crooked, the whole wall comes down." That afternoon, Michael left, saying he was meeting the accountant. I stayed, fixing some planters on the porch. It was drizzling, making the earth dark. The smell of the flowers mixed with the dampness, that familiar perfume of old age. I looked at Rose's picture inside and whispered, "Another storm's coming, isn't it, my love?" About a week later, my son came back. His face was tired, his eyes more sunken, but there was something firm in his gaze. "Dad," he said as soon as he walked in, "you were right. She took over $20,000, and someone inside the company helped her. I can't believe I was so blind for so long." I pulled out a chair and poured him coffee. "What will you do?" "I'm pressing charges, not just for the money, for the principle." I looked him in the eye and said slowly, "But remember, your honor doesn't need other people to see it. It lives inside you. Whether you press charges or not, you have to do the thing that lets you look in the mirror without feeling ashamed." Michael clenched his fists, then relaxed them. "I understand, but it won't be easy." "Nothing is, son, not even forgiveness." We sat in the quiet kitchen, just the sound of the rain outside and the steady drip of the faucet. I looked at my son, the man who once believed money could buy anything, now learning the lesson my life had already taught me by heart. Real justice isn't found in a courtroom. It's found in the heart of someone who knows when to stop. That night before he left, Michael said, "Dad, if this all blows up, I'm afraid it's going to drag you into it. I just hope you don't worry." I smiled slowly. "I've been through bigger storms, son. But remember, no matter what happens, don't lose yourself. Because when you lose yourself, even a victory feels like a defeat." Michael nodded. The door closed, leaving the lingering smell of coffee and the murmur of the wind. I sat in my wooden chair. I looked at Rose's picture frame and whispered, "The storm is here. But this time, don't you worry, my love. Our boy knows how to steer the ship." 3 days later, while I was watering the hibiscus in the yard, I heard a frantic knocking at the gate. When I opened it, I saw Stephanie standing there, immaculate. Her perfume was still intense, but her eyes were different. The arrogant air of someone who thought she'd won was gone. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I came to visit," she said quietly. "I brought you some money, to make up for my mistake." I looked at the white envelope she was holding, as fragile as a written confession. "What money?" I asked. "It's your part. I know I was wrong, but I hope you'll accept it. It's just $200, a gesture of goodwill." I didn't take it. I stood still, listening to the quiet beat of my heart. "You think my honor's worth $200, Stephanie?" She swallowed, looking away. "Don't say that. I just want peace. I want this to be over. Michael is furious, and I'm afraid it will affect his work, his reputation." Just then, my son's car pulled up. He got out, his face as cold as steel. "What are you afraid of, Stephanie? That other people will find out the truth?" The air in the yard grew thick. Stephanie took half a step back, clutching her purse. "You're just in time. I just want to end this. Can't you see I'm trying?" Michael stared at her. "Trying to cover up, not to make it right. You said you cared about my father, but you let him stand in a food pantry line. You said you loved me, but you stole from my company, and now you come here to end this? You're wrong, Stephanie. This is just beginning." I saw her hands shake. She tried to smile, but her voice broke. "You don't understand. I just wanted to live well, like anyone else. You have everything. I just wanted a small piece." "No, Stephanie," I said, my voice soft but firm. "You can only want the piece that you've earned. What you take from others, sooner or later, turns to ash." Stephanie bit her lip. Then suddenly, she lifted her head, her voice bitter. "You think you're such a saint, Michael. I know more than you think. I can make you lose everything. The company, your reputation, even this devoted son image you're trying to build." Michael didn't flinch. He just stepped closer and stared at her for a long time. "You can say whatever you want, but there's one thing you'll never get back. Trust." Stephanie looked around, as if searching for something to hold on to. Then she turned to me, her eyes red. "Earl, Dad, at least you believe I was sincere with Michael once, don't you?" Or, I looked her right in the eye, without anger or pity. "I believe that at some point you loved him, but you let greed eat your heart, and when that happens, love dies too." Unable to stand it, she turned, pulled open the gate, and said quietly, "You'll see. Honest people always lose." I answered her with the wind at my back. "Honest people only lose for a little while. Dishonest people lose for a lifetime." The gate slammed shut. Michael stood still, his fists still clenched. I looked at him, and I saw in his eyes not anger, but the weariness of someone who just woke up from an illusion. "Dad," he said quietly, "I'm afraid this is just the beginning." I nodded. "Yes, but this time, you're not alone." Outside, gray clouds were gathering, promising rain. Inside, I felt it too. The truth, once it wakes up, rarely stops halfway. That morning the sky was gray and heavy, and the wind blew down the small street like the whole city was holding its breath. I had just put the coffee pot on the stove when I heard an urgent knock on the door. When I opened it, I saw a process server standing on the porch, holding a thick envelope. "Earl Thompson?" he asked. I nodded, and he handed me the document. In cold, formal letters, I read the notification. "Petition for cognitive evaluation due to suspected mental decline." The petitioner, Stephanie R. Thompson. I read that far, and my hand started to shake. Mental decline? Me? It's funny how people can take your money, your honor, and when there's nothing left, they try to take your mind. I stood there for a long time, listening to the wind howl over the tin roof. Michael arrived a few minutes later, his face flushed with anger. "I just heard from the lawyer. She really filed it, Dad. She's saying you're senile, that you don't have the capacity to sign contracts, and that your testimony about the money isn't reliable. She's planning to use it to dismiss the company charges, too." I didn't answer right away. I just poured more coffee and pushed a mug toward my son. "Here. Anger you don't drink with a clear head only burns the one holding it." "You don't understand," he said, his voice tight. "She's trying to have you declared crazy to protect herself." "I understand more than you think, Michael," I answered slowly. "I've seen plenty of people who are poor in money but rich in schemes. They're afraid of the truth, so they slander the ones who tell it." He sat down, his head in his hands. "I fought the petition, but the court, they still ordered the evaluation. It's scheduled for tomorrow morning at the County Senior Health Center. Are you ready?" I looked at him and smiled. "I've lived long enough to know you don't defend your honor with weapons. You defend it by being clear-headed. If they want to test my memory, I'll show them that memories have strength too." The next morning, I put on the blue shirt that Rose always liked. Michael drove me, not saying much. The Senior Health Center was a stark white building, with long hallways that smelled like disinfectant. A young doctor greeted me with a soft voice. Mr. Thompson, we're just going to do a few small tests. Nothing to worry about. Just answer honestly. She asked me the date, the name of the president. She asked me to count backward from 100 by sevens. I did, and every number came out as clear as a brick laid by a master. Then she showed me 3 drawings and asked me to remember them: a cat, a tree, and a clock. When she asked me again later, I named all 3. Finally, she smiled. Could you tell me your favorite proverb? I answered right away. The devil knows more from being old than from being the devil. No, not that one. It's, you learn more from living than you ever do from reading. Older folks know more from what they've lived than what's in a book. She laughed and wrote something on her report. Completely normal, no signs of decline. Michael sighed with relief and took my hand. Dad, we won. I just shook my head. Not yet, son. The real victory isn't when people believe I'm sane. It's when the liar realizes she's the one who's blind. That afternoon, I returned home. With the wind blowing through the hibiscus, I placed the certificate on the little shelf next to Rose's coffee mug. See, Rose, I whispered, they can doubt my memory, but nobody can doubt my love for the truth. Outside, the church bells rang. Each chime felt like an affirmation. When you live with the truth, nobody can make you lose your mind. I thought things would quiet down after the evaluation, but life rarely stays calm for long. The next evening, just as the sun was setting, I heard a car stop at the gate. I looked out. It was Stephanie, standing there, in an immaculate white dress, her hair perfect, but her gaze was different. There was no confidence, just the look of someone lost in a fog, not knowing the way back. She didn't knock. She just stood there for a few seconds and then said, "Can I come in?" I nodded. This house doesn't close its door on anyone, not even on those who've forgotten the way back. She walked in slowly, her perfume mixing with the lingering smell of coffee. In the pale light, her face was clear. The makeup couldn't hide her exhaustion. She sat in a chair, clutching her purse. "I heard about the results of the evaluation," she began, her voice trembling. "Dad, Earl, the truth is, I never thought things would go this far. I just wanted to defend myself. They told me to do it. They said if I could prove you were senile, your words wouldn't have any legal standing." I watched her for a moment. Who's they? The lawyer and a friend who helped me manage the company accounting. A friend or an accomplice? I asked quietly. My words were like a knife. She smiled bitterly, a tear rolling down her cheek. "Do you think I'm a monster? I just wanted someone to see me as valuable. My whole life I've been looked down on, from my parents' house until I married Michael. I thought if I had money, a house, a car, they would respect me. But I was wrong. All I got was this huge emptiness." I sighed. People aren't pitiful because of their mistakes, Stephanie. They're pitiful because they don't dare take responsibility for them. Why did you come here today? For forgiveness or for a way out? She looked at me, her eyes red. Isn't it the same thing, Dad? Forgiveness is a way to escape the guilt. I shook my head gently. No, child. Forgiveness doesn't erase the sin. It just helps you start over without carrying the weight. But before you can be forgiven, you have to look at yourself with honesty. Stephanie fell silent. After a long time, she stood up and looked at the photo of Rose on the table. Michael's mother must hate me. Rose didn't know how to hate, I said, my voice low. She only felt sad for people who lost their own goodness. Stephanie turned, and the tears were streaming down her face now. I've lost everything, Dad. Love, trust, myself. I looked her right in the eye. You didn't lose it, I said, my voice as soft as the wind. You just never knew how to keep it, because you only knew how to love in order to get, not how to give. Stephanie ducked her head and broke down, sobbing. There was no trace left of the cold woman who had stood before me, just a girl, lost in the ruins she herself had built. I walked over and put a hand on her shoulder. Go ahead and cry. Sometimes tears are the last goodbye to your pride and the beginning of understanding. She sobbed and took a step back. Thank you, Dad, but I think I'm too late. Better late than never, I said. But remember, regret only means something when you do something about it. She nodded and walked to the door. Before leaving, she turned, her eyes shining in the twilight. "Dad, if you can, please tell Michael I'm sorry. Not so he'll forgive me, just so he knows my tears were real." When the door closed, I stared at the wet spot from her tears on the floor. Outside, the wind whipped the hibiscus, tearing at the petals as red as a wound that won't heal. I whispered, as if to Rose, "See? Even the darkness, sometimes it knows how to cry." I thought that after Stephanie's visit things would calm down, but life isn't easy, especially for those who've given in to greed. 3 days later, I was sitting on the porch reading an old newspaper when Michael burst in, his face tight. "Dad, we need to talk," he said quickly, not even taking off his jacket. I set the paper down. "More problems at the company?" He nodded, dropping a thick folder on the table. "I just found out Stephanie didn't act alone. Someone inside the company helped her transfer the money, create fake documents, even sign my name." I went quiet, feeling my heart sink. "Who?" Michael took a deep breath, his voice catching. "Oscar, my head of finance, my best friend, the one who ate at our table, the one who sat right where you are and listened to you tell the story of building Rose's house. I don't want to believe it, Dad, but the proof is clear." He opened the folder, and each page he turned sounded dry and crisp. Bank statements, contracts, messages, signatures, it all matched. I looked at those cold numbers, and I thought of the young man's face, who always greeted me with such respect when he came over. My world, which I thought just smelled of coffee and cement, was suddenly mixed with the cold steel of betrayal. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I'm meeting him this afternoon, at the coffee shop near the office. I want to hear it from him before I hand it over to the lawyers." I nodded. "I'm coming with you. An old man like me. Maybe I can see a person's heart more clearly than you." Michael started to object, but then he just hung his head. "Okay, Dad." That afternoon, dark clouds covered the city. The coffee shop was on a busy corner, and the smell of pastries mixed with car exhaust. When we walked in, Oscar was already sitting there, in a perfect suit but with sweat on his forehead. "Michael, Mr. Thompson." He smiled, but his voice was shaky. Thanks for seeing me." Michael sat down, his expression as cold as a mirror. "I'm not here for excuses. I just want the truth." "Why, Oscar?" The young man looked down, wringing his hands. "Stephanie said it was temporary. She promised she'd pay it back, that you'd never find out. I was stupid. I believed her. I owed her money, so—" "You didn't owe her," I interrupted. "You owed yourself honesty. When you help a liar, you don't just lose your job. You lose a piece of yourself." Oscar looked up, his eyes wet. "I know, Mr. Thompson. I'm so sorry." Michael hit the table, making the cups rattle. "Sorry doesn't give my father his honor back. It doesn't erase the months of deception." I put my hand on my son's shoulder. "Easy, Michael. When you shout, people cover their ears, but when you tell the truth, they have to listen." I turned back to Oscar. "You're still young. You can fix this. Give us all the proof. Help my son get justice. If you do that, at least you'll keep your conscience." Oscar nodded, tears streaming down his face now. "I will, I swear." Michael took a deep breath and nodded slowly. "Then keep your word." We left the coffee shop as the rain started to fall. The cold wind hit our faces. Michael gripped the steering wheel. His voice was heavy. "Dad, I feel like I aged 10 years today." I looked out the window where the raindrops were making long streaks of light. "Don't worry, son. Some rain just gets your clothes wet. But other rain, it washes the dust from your soul." Michael didn't say anything else. I saw his shoulders slowly relax, and I knew, in that moment, that before he'd even faced his enemy, he had already conquered himself. After the meeting with Oscar, the days went quiet. Stephanie disappeared from the city, and Michael threw himself into his work, trying to patch the holes she'd left. And I was still here, in my old house, which, after so many years of being forgotten, once again had the sound of people, of laughter, and the smell of coffee in the morning. One evening, Michael came home late. He walked in, took off his tie, unbuttoned his collar, and slumped into the wooden chair like a kid just home from school. "Dad," he said, "starting tomorrow I'm staying here for a few days. I'm sick of that house in the hills. I just nodded. Any house is a home if you have someone who knows how to live in it. At least here, you can breathe. That night I made dinner. Pinto beans, white rice, and some fresh cheese. Michael helped me set the plates, cut the limes, and clear the table. Neither of us talked much, just the clinking of spoons and the smell of beans filling the little kitchen. When we finished eating, I watched him get up, grab the broom to sweep the porch, and water the hibiscus plants that Rose used to care for. I watched him through the window with an indescribable warmth in my heart. You know, I said from inside, Rose always believed that if you do one small thing with all your heart every day, life will never close its doors on you. Michael looked up and smiled. You still remember everything Mom said, huh? Of course. Her words always have a place, right in this coffee cup. I held out a white porcelain mug, Rose's mug. Keep it, I said. I think it's time it was used again. Michael looked at the mug and shook his head. I'm afraid I'll break it. You won't, I smiled. The mug isn't what breaks. What breaks is when people forget its value. We sat on the porch, drinking coffee, listening to the wind on the tin roof. Across the street, some kids were playing, their laughter echoing in the night. Michael leaned against the wall and said quietly, I've never felt so peaceful, Dad. It's been a long time since I heard kids playing without just feeling tired. That's because you're where your roots are, I answered. People can build all the skyscrapers they want, but if they don't have roots, the first strong wind will knock them down. Michael was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I want to start over, not with Stephanie, with life. I want my company to be honest, the same way you taught me to build walls. Every brick has to be perfectly straight. I put my hand on his shoulder, my gaze lost somewhere past the trees. If you keep those words in your heart, son, then I can rest easy. That night when he went up to sleep, I stayed on the porch, listening to the steady breathing of the house. The night wind brought the smell of earth, of coffee, and somewhere, the faint scent of Rose's dried lavender. I said to myself, See, Rose? Our boy. He's finally come home. He doesn't need to be the richest, just the most decent. I looked up at the sky. Through the thick clouds, a small star had just broken through. I thought it was Rose, and in that moment, I knew this house, after so many years of winds and storms, finally had someone living in it with truth. The day of the trial, it rained from early morning. The street in front of the courthouse was wet and slick, and cars passed like blurry shadows. I put on my old raincoat and sat next to Michael in the car. He drove slowly, silently, his face focused, but with a clear tension in his eyes. I knew today wasn't just Stephanie's trial. It was the first time my son was facing his past with true calm. When we arrived, the courthouse hallway was full. People hurried back and forth, their footsteps mixing with the sound of the rain outside. Stephanie was already sitting there, dressed in black. She was thinner, paler. Her lawyer sat next to her, a man with a sharp face. When our eyes met, she looked down. I just gave a small nod. No hate, no pity, just the weariness of someone who has come full circle. The trial began. Her lawyer spoke fast, his words sharp. My client acted only out of concern for her father-in-law, who was showing clear signs of cognitive decline. All money was held purely for the purpose of protecting him. Michael's fist clenched, but I put my old hand on top of his. Quiet, son, I whispered. The truth doesn't need to shout. When it was my turn, the judge asked, Mr. Thompson, do you wish to say anything in your defense? I stood up, leaning a little on my cane. Your Honor, I don't need to defend myself, because a man who has lived by his hands for 70 years has nothing to lose, except the truth. I don't have a college degree. I don't know about laws, but I know this. When you take another person's money without telling them, no matter how much you smile, you carry a debt. The whole courtroom was silent. I looked at Stephanie. Her head was down, her lips trembling. The lawyer tried to object, but the judge waved him quiet. Then, our lawyer presented the evidence, the bank statements from Oscar, all the transactions, the forged signatures, and Oscar's own confession. It was all clear, undeniable. Stephanie bowed her head. A tear dripped onto the wooden table. I didn't feel satisfaction. I just felt pity for a soul who had just written her own sentence. After listening, the judge banged his gavel. The court finds Stephanie Thompson and Oscar Fernandez guilty of fraud and forgery. Restitution is ordered and a professional ban for 3 years. Bees. Michael let out a breath like a huge weight was lifted. I looked at him and said quietly, "Don't be happy, son. We didn't beat anyone today. We just got back what we lost. Our peace." As everyone was leaving, Stephanie approached, her eyes swollen and red. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice choked, "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I want to thank you for not humiliating me in there." I looked at her, my voice steady. "The only person who can humiliate you, Stephanie, is the one who loses their own dignity, not the one who tells the truth." She nodded and walked away, out into the rain. Her figure got smaller and smaller in the crowd. I watched her go and then said quietly, either to myself or to her, "I hope you find the good part of yourself, before it's too late." Michael started the engine and the car pulled away from the courthouse. An old love song was playing on the radio. I leaned my head against the window, watching the rain streak by. I didn't feel heavy anymore, just quiet. I thought maybe justice isn't in a sentence. Maybe it's in the moment you choose not to take revenge. It was still raining, but in the middle of that rain, I saw something else. The light of compassion. Silent, but bright enough to light the whole way home. After the trial, life slowly returned to a peace I once thought I'd never get back. Michael took time off from the company, leaving his trusted young director in charge. He said he wanted to breathe real life for a while, something he'd only heard about in my stories. Every morning we'd make coffee together, sweep the porch, and then walk to the corner market. The neighbors would see us and smile. Some would even say quietly, "Earl, you finally got your son back." I'd just smile. That one sentence was enough to make me feel richer than anyone. One day, sitting on the porch, Michael said, "Dad, I want to do something to give back what we've learned. Not because of Stephanie or the court, but for people like you. Old folks who were forgotten, taken advantage of, or seen as a burden." I looked at him and nodded. "If you do it with your heart, son, it'll be the strongest thing you ever build." And so, it began. He met with old friends, asked for donations, and just a few months later, the Rose of Hope Foundation was born. Named after his mother, the woman who had held the whole family up with her small, strong hands. The foundation's goal was to help elderly women, those who had no one to care for them or who had been abandoned by their families. On opening day, the small room was decorated with pots of purple lavender. I sat in the front row, wearing the white shirt Rose always liked. When the host invited Michael to speak, he stood up, his voice shaking just a little. "I created this foundation to honor the person who taught me that dignity can never be bought," he said, "my mother, Rose, and my father, Earl, who showed me that justice isn't in a courtroom, it's in how we treat the most vulnerable." Everyone clapped. I looked at him, and tears rolled down my cheeks before I could stop them. In that moment, I knew Rose was close, smiling. After the ceremony, a young volunteer approached me with a cup of coffee. It was white porcelain, identical to Rose's. "They told me you like your coffee black. No sugar," she said. "So that's how I made it." I smiled and took it. "That's right, child. Real coffee, like real life. If it's bitter, you remember it longer." Outside, the sun was shining on the lavender, its scent spreading on the wind. Inside me, for the first time in many years, there was only one feeling: peace. A few months later, Michael invited me to go to Charleston. "I want you to see the ocean again," he said. I didn't refuse. The ocean was the place Rose had always dreamed of going, but never could. When she was alive, every penny went to this roof. We got to the beach early. The sun wasn't up yet, and the wind carried the salt taste of the water, the smell of seaweed mixed with the coffee from the thermos I'd brought. I sat on the sand, watching the white-capped waves break on the shore, listening to that sound, like the heartbeat of the world. Michael took a small bundle from his bag, dried lavender, just like what we had planted by the house. He put it in my hands. "Dad, should we, for Mom?" I nodded. We walked together to the water's edge. The waves lapped at our feet, cold. We tossed the bundle and watched it drift away, getting smaller and smaller in the vastness of the sea. "Goodbye, Rose," I whispered. "See? Our boy. He finally understands what it means to love." Michael put his hand on my shoulder. "I don't know if I deserve for Mom to forgive me, but I'm going to live in a way that makes her proud." I turned, smiled, and nodded. "Your mother doesn't need to forgive you. She just needs to see you value this life. That's enough." We sat in silence for a long time, watching the sky turn orange. The waves kept breaking. I poured coffee into 2 mugs, one for me, one for my son. "Here, Michael, for your mom." He took the mug, his gaze lost on the water, his voice thick. "The coffee smells different today, Dad." "It's the sea breeze," I answered, "and because in this breeze there's the scent of your mother." We stayed there until the sun was all the way up. The golden light spilled over the water, reflecting in the 2 steaming coffee mugs. I closed my eyes, my heart feeling as light as if it had never carried any weight at all. As we left the beach, I looked back. The lavender bundle was gone, dissolved in the waves. Just a few petals were left floating. I knew my life in the end would be like that. It would float away, but it would leave its scent behind. On the way back, Michael held the steering wheel firmly and said quietly, "Dad, I think I finally understand why Mom always said, 'Love is never lost, it just changes houses.'" I smiled, looking out the windshield. The sky was clearer than I'd ever seen it. "That's right, son," I said, "and today, your mother's love lives in us, in every breath of wind, in every drop of coffee, and in this life that we can still call home." We got back to the city on a windy afternoon. The sunset light slanted over the old rooftops, turning them gold like a faded painting. When the car turned down the little alley to the house, I felt a strange warmth in my heart. My old house, after so many storms, looked peaceful, like an old friend waiting with open arms. Michael parked the car and got out first to open the gate. He turned and gave me a smile I hadn't seen in a long time, the smile of a son who isn't carrying any weight on his heart. "Dad, from now on, I'm coming every weekend. I want you to tell me stories. I want to learn how to plant hibiscus, how to make coffee like you." I smiled and nodded. "If you're willing to learn, I'm willing to be your teacher." That night we ate dinner under the yellow kitchen light. Outside, the wind gently tapped the window, carrying the smell of the season's first rain. I took out 2 porcelain mugs, one for Rose, one for me. Then I said, "We're missing one." Michael looked surprised. "It's yours," I told him. "From now on, there will always be 3 mugs here. One for the one who's gone, one for the one who's still here, and one for the one who's learning how to love." He looked at me, his eyes shining. "Dad, you know, I think I finally understand why you didn't get angry. Through all the betrayal, all the insults." I smiled a little. "Because anger only makes you forget you're human. Forgiveness, though, it keeps the light on in your heart. And as you can see, light is the only thing that can keep this house warm." That night, lying in my old bed, I heard the tapping of the rain on the tin roof. In the next room, I could hear my son's voice, singing an old love song that Rose used to hum. I closed my eyes, letting the memories mix with his song, letting the past melt into the present. When I fell asleep, I dreamed that Rose was sitting on the porch, smiling at us. Next to her, there were 3 steaming mugs of coffee, their aroma mixing with the wind, as warm as the embrace of someone who is no longer here. A year later, the little house on Willow Creek had changed. Michael had repainted the walls. He planted more lavender along the fence and hung a small carved wooden sign by the gate. Rose's house, home of trust. Every weekend, the old folks from the neighborhood would stop by for coffee and to tell stories. Michael and I were always there, listening, sometimes just smiling. On the anniversary of the Rose of Hope Foundation, the local radio station came to interview us. They asked me, "Mr. Thompson, what makes you keep believing in people after everything that's happened?" I smiled, looking at the coffee mug in my hand, because I believe goodness never dies. It just goes to sleep, waiting for someone to wake it up with compassion. That night I sat on the porch watching the red sunset. Michael made coffee and handed me a mug. "Dad, the foundation took in 5 new people today. We're doing the right thing, aren't we?" I nodded, breathing in the deep, rich smell. Yes, son. We're not doing anything great. We're just doing what's right. And what's right, if you do it with your heart, goes further than anything else. I looked up at the sky and whispered to Rose, "Old girl." Our son found himself. The evening breeze blew, making the lavender sway. The last light of the day shined on the 3 coffee mugs on the table. One for me, one for Rose, and one for Michael, I said quietly, like a conclusion to my whole life. The roots are still strong, and love has never left this house. If this story moved you, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left of your screen. Thanks for listening.